Hey, Shalom, Grand Rising, OCO, Halito. Welcome to the video. Welcome to the channel. I am your brother Danyala, aka the Copper Color Aboriginal. And yeah, before we get started, I want to give all honor, praises to the Most High. Yeah, shout out to you guys and gals. Welcome to the video. I know I hadn't made a video in a long time. It's been a minute, and yeah, your boy, I just been busy. I've been busy. Life has been happening. Um, just so much, man. I mean, new job or new company, shall I say, because I'm still doing the same job, which is truck driving, just different companies. I've been through probably about two different companies since I think last uploaded video. No, actually, that's not true. Only one company, because I was with a new company when I was making my last videos probably about a month or two ago, a few months ago, actually about like 3 months ago. So yeah, it's been a minute. It's been a minute. I just been busy working, taking care of the family, learning new things, a lot of new things, man. Been learning a lot of new things, coming across new characters, new content creators, if you will. I don't really like to call them content creators because you have content creators and then you have people who create learning material. They're teaching, they're teachers. Um, and I don't really like to call them content creators in the same sense of what we're used to, because when it comes to those people, they're creating content for entertainment purposes, while these people are sharing little known information, hidden information. So yeah, anyways, I wanted to share some of the content that I have came across recently, and yeah, how a lot of this stuff backs up. A lot of these creators, they actually teach the same concept that I teach, and that many others have taught before me. Shout out to Corey Mayo, shout out to UB, shout out to Dane Calloway, and all the others out there, whether you got small or big YouTube channels. Shout out to y'all. Um, teaching that, they teach various things. They don't all teach the same things, but essentially that us so-called American Negroes, that we have always been here. There's just too much evidence today to suggest other than that, right? You still have your people who call themselves Native Americans, your people of the, how can I say, Asiatic stock, who are still grasping on to the hope that we won't wake up, right? And I learned quite a bit of who these people are, who they actually are, right? Now, not don't twist my words, and I'm still learning. I'm still learning, right? But not every person who calls himself Native American or Hispanic fully belongs to this group, this invasive group that we call Native Americans, because if we're going to be honest, they are an invasive group. They are not indigenous by any sense of the word to the Americas in the same sense that we are, right? We came out of the ground here and we have always been here, right? While other groups may have originated here, but they didn't have rights to the lands here, and they were supposed to go into other lands, right? And settle those lands. But then they came back to America, the mother of everyone, and they decided to set up camp here, enslave, imprison, and to destroy the people who were already here, who have always been here, who were granted the land here. We are the parents of civilization. We are the parents of humanity, which is why the brother who they pulled his genes. I can't remember the gentleman's name, but I believe this was in the I want to say like the 1960s, 70s, or 80s, where they found out that he has the oldest genetics out of anyone on the face of this planet, not Africa, but here. And I may retouch that later on in this video, right? Because I have a video talking about it, Africa, and what it may have very well been the entire time. So anyways, without further ado, the first video I wanted to pull up is this guy right here. Wait, let me see. For some reason it's not pulling up. Let me oh, here it is, right here. This guy. So this is a guy who I've just recently come across. I want to say it's probably been about 2 months that I've started watching this guy's content. Pretty good channel, by the way. His name is Taylor Durden. So TaylorDurden. Taylor Durden. You can find him on YouTube, but I originally came across his content on Facebook. His name is Taolure. So Taolure. Find him on Facebook. He's also on Instagram by either one of those names. I can't remember which one. He does have a Patreon. So you could check that out. You can support him if you like the information that he shares, because he goes pretty deep, man. And yeah, he is what we would call a white guy, right? And he's not 100% white. So that disclaimer there, he's not 100% what we call white, right? White Caucasian. He is actually part us, right? His mother, I believe his mother is biracial, while his father is a Caucasian man. I think he believes that his father's of Mediterranean descent. So yeah, this is why if you watch his videos, you can actually see he has a natural tan to him. And this is why his vernacular, his cadence is very similar to ours, because he was raised around his black family, right? His melanated family, or he says you melanated family. So yeah. And you melanated is just a different type of melanin that we carry, because everyone has melanin, but we have you melanin, right? While white folks, they carry a different type of melanin, which isn't the same as ours, right? Theirs is sulfur based, ours is carbon based, and this is even backed up by science, right? So excuse me. Anyways, we're going to watch his video. He has a lot of great videos. Check him out. Also check out Pharaoh's House. Pharaoh House, he's another great brother out there. I will say he's like a master teacher. This brother knows a whole lot. And I'm telling you, when these people talk, when them two talk, even when Taylor talks on his own, a lot of stuff that he shares, it makes sense. It like clicks. And you can tell that he gets a lot of his information, not only from like different books and stuff, but he also gets it from other content creators, right? Like Pharaoh's House, even Mind Unveiled, which is a person who content I've shared on this channel a few times before. Check out Mind Unveiled. Great content. He's in the same wheelhouse as me and a bunch of others who teach America as the old world. He also, shared that, black folks were the original indigenous people of these lands. But the only thing with Mind Unveiled is that he doesn't go deep enough, and I feel like he intentionally doesn't share all the information just to keep his audience happy, right? Because I'm sure even in this truth seeking realm, you have white supremacists. You have people who want black folks to always be at the bottom and white folks to be on the top. Now you have white folks who don't mind that, they don't mind the idea that America is the true old world because it's mystery, it's cool and all that stuff. But then when you say, well, black folks were these black Americans that y'all hate so much, who y'all tell to go home to Africa, are the true indigenous and owners of this land that we call America, this great land that we call America, they don't want to hear that, right? They're oh yeah, that's cool, America being the original old world, and that there was all this ancient architecture over here, and that the true old world was over here, meaning that all the biblical kingdoms were over here: Greece, Rome, Babylon, Assyria, Lebanon, Israel, all the different Canaanite, Hamitic, and all those Shemitic civilizations were over here in the Americas. They're like, oh, that's cool. So all these buildings, these government buildings, these universities, these hospitals, these psychiatric wards, and all this stuff, these were actually these buildings, these structures, these schools, these were actually old world structures that the Greeks and Romans and the Babylonians and Israelites dwelled in. That's so cool. Wow, I really love it. Wait, you're telling me that these black folks are the descendants of these people, and that they're not from Africa, that they're not pathetic, that they're not, second-rate humans, that they're not apes and all this stuff, they're not unintelligent, that they built civilization as we know it? They don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that, right? See, people got to understand that the true old world is America. check out the World's Fairs. There's channels like My Lunch Break, Mine Unveiled, John Levi, all these different channels out there that share the information of all the structures and the civilizations that used to be here, right? The remnants of it, right? We had so much tech over here. Even the brother Dane Calloway, he's made a few videos talking about how advanced the old world was. Because what people got to understand is that America is Atlantis. Shout out to Kareemio. He was one of the first people to share that information, at least from what I've seen. He was one of the first people. And let me say this. I have nothing but love and respect for Kareemio. Some people may take what I put in this video as disrespect towards him. I have nothing but love for that man. He was one of the first people who woke me up to this idea that America is the old world. Well, actually, it was my dad. My dad be throwing like little gems out there every now and then. But my dad, he woke me up to that. And one day I went onto YouTube and typed in Israel was really in America. And then that's when I came across so many other things. Like I came across the Lost Lunar Stone because my dad put me onto that when I was a teenager. Or actually a young adult, Lost Lunar Stone, all this stuff. And I started Googling this. I started Googling this into YouTube, and I came across Corey Mayo, right? I came across, well, actually, yeah, it was Corey Mayo, then Dane Calloway. Or it could have been Dane Calloway. Yeah, it was Dane Calloway first, then Corey Mayo, and then UB like right after. Like I found UB and Corey Mayo like within the same week, right? I was like, y'all dudes should link up, man. Y'all sharing the same information, right? But anyways, even Dane has shared some information recently about America being the true old world and the tech that we had here. And we had a lot of tech. Do y'all ever wonder why American Negroes in the past had created so many inventions? It's because a lot of that tech is old world tech. Old world tech. Black Americans have been credited for so many inventions. Why? Because we are literally carrying over the same technology that we had in previous kingdoms, right? I totally believe that when the colonizers came over here, and mind you, the colonizers look just like us when they came over here, right? The pale skin, like the brother on the screen, that was a much later look. That was introduced into the world much later. They were very far and few in between, right? I'll get into that in a little bit. But yeah. When they came over here, I believe that the Americas, we were at our lowest point in a long time, which is why they were able to come over here and conquer us, was because we were at a very low point at that time. We had these advanced high culture civilizations. It wasn't just the Mayan or the Aztecs. Those were just the remnants of the great civilizations that we had here, the Atlantis culture, as I'm going to call it, right? They were just a remnant of the Atlantis culture that we had in the Americas, because all of the Americas is Atlantis. Yeah, we had some of Atlantis that was sunken underwaters. Like go and Google Bimini, right? Go and Google that, right? It's over there in, I believe it is off of the coast of Bermuda. There's this place called the Bimini Structures. I believe that's what it's called. Go and Google that. And you will see that there are underwater structures right off the coast, right? So I am under the impression, and there's books that talk about this. There's even other YouTubers who have shared information about, Atlantis sinking, parts of America sinking underwater. And as we can see today, we still have land mass. We still have parts of America that are going underwater, like California, for example, is sinking. Florida, for example, is sinking. So what I'm saying is that this whole concept of, land sinking underwater or the water levels rising is not a new concept. It's not something that's made up. It's actually still happening in our time today, right? I honestly believe that there were several resets. I believe that, I totally believe that there were civilizations that once exist that are now covered by our oceans. I believe that there were resets before Noah's flood and even after Noah's flood. There was probably a possibility that before Noah's flood there was way less water. There's actually a lot of evidence that there was way less oceans or ocean, because there's really just one body of water, but there was way less ocean than there is now. And if you go into Google Maps, you can actually see the lines. You can see 90-degree angles. Like that does not occur in nature normally. It doesn't. You don't see 90-degree angles. Like look at that screen back there behind me. You can literally go to Google Maps and find lines like that underwater. Underwater. That's not natural. And they're going for miles. You literally see whole grid structures underwater, right? And these lines that you see, they look like skinny little lines, right? They may look like a skinny little line like that, but in actuality, they are miles wide and thousands of miles long. That's not normal. Just like you can go off the coast of Japan, they have underground structures. All around the world, there's underwater structures off the coasts of a lot of these landmass, a lot of structures. Just like you could find wheels, you could find ancient Roman and Greco-Roman wheels up under water, inside these seas and oceans and stuff like that. That's because the water level was so much lower back then. And I'm not sure if it was through Noah's flood or other events that happened before or after that made the water level rise or whatever it may have happened. But there were definitely civilizations that were here. And if you look at it from that perspective, we're essentially living on mountains. We are essentially living on mountains because these civilizations that did exist, which is now on our seafloor, they were much lower in altitude, right? The sea level would have been much lower back then. And to think that, we live thousands of feet above the seafloor, I mean, we're literally living on top of mountains. It's crazy, right? But anyways, like I was saying about the Americas, I believe that the tech that we have now, honestly, I feel like it's just a reimagination of the tech that we had back then. Because I totally believe that Nikola Tesla, with all the patents that he had, that the government totally did not allow him to create. Because he had a lot of great inventions. And there's a documentary that I actually want to check out. And I can't remember the name of it, but if I remember the name of it, I'm going to put it in a comment below, right? But there's this documentary that talks about ancient tech that they kept from society that Nikola Tesla created, but I think he discovered it. I think that because if you notice that it wasn't until the Americas was created that we started to come up with a lot of this new technology and these inventions. I totally believe that, had they not discovered America, they will still be in the Dark Ages. This is why they had the Dark Ages, right? And then when they came into the Renaissance era, this is when they started to explore different parts of the world, right? They started to go into China, right? And in Asia and different parts of that world, because Europe was very isolated at one point in time, and they were in the Dark Ages. And in order for them to come out the Dark Ages, they started to tap into that ancient technology, which some of it was still found in China. Like even to this day, I think China is kind of like the last frontier, if you will, when it comes to ancient tech and a lot of ancient techniques that we used back then, like even medicine and stuff like that. I think that they're kind of like the last of holding on to that, because mind you, and I'll get into it in a second, the ancient Atlanteans, they colonized that area. They built up that area, right? And China, even though they had invaders come over there and stuff like that, they kind of held on to the ancient tech and the ancient, knowledge that we once had, right? But once when they started going to that world, they started to wake up, right? They brought themselves out of the Dark Ages. I'm talking about Europe. And then they went over to the Americas and they pulled themselves out of the Dark Ages for sure, right? Because then all these inventions started to come about. Then we had the industrialization era, right? Which caused this whole boom for the West, right? And this is when they started to get all their, I believe, our ancient tech. They, from 1492, let's just keep it real. They were over here before 1492. But let's just run with the narrative from 1492 all the way up to the early 1900s. That's when the West had its boom when it came to knowledge and even inventions, right? I believe that, the books that they had, they didn't have all the scripts over here. I mean, over in Europe, they didn't have all the literature, the biblical literature and all that stuff until they got over here in the Americas. They stole a lot of our stuff. Not only did they steal our manuscripts, our books, but they also stole a lot of our inventions, and they took a lot of our artifacts and relics and then put them over on that side of the world, talking about Europe, the Middle East and Africa. They took our stuff and put it over there. This is why if you go and look, the oldest Paleo Hebrew artifacts were found here in the Americas. Literally, the oldest Paleo Hebrew that you can find were found here in the Americas, not over in the Middle East, not over in that little sandbox that we call Israel. That's all fake. Now, I'm not gonna say it's all fake because some of the stuff is stolen and it was taken over there. Check out Father Crespi. I mentioned him several times before on this channel. Check him out. And how he had a lot of old Babylonian, Egyptian, Assyrian relics, and how they attempted to burn down his little museum, and he salvaged thousands of them. Mind you, he had several thousand of artifacts and relics. They went missing. They were destroyed, and he was able to salvage a few thousand of them after the fire. And this was after he shared this information with the Vatican. They told him he can keep a museum, make a museum. And then after that, they obviously sent someone to try to destroy all the relics, right? But he, like I said, he managed to save a few thousand of them. And then shortly after he died, after the Mormons documented it, I used to think kind of good of the Mormons, but now I think I'm learning that they're actually a small arm of the Vatican. Yeah. But anyways, after Father Crespi died, all those artifacts disappeared. They vanished. But luckily, they were cataloged. Well, they weren't cataloged because they weren't kept, but they were, I guess, they were studied and even cataloged in a sense, right? But yeah, man, it's a shame. But America's a truer world, right? And when they came over here, the Europeans came over here, they caught us at our lowest, right? They kicked us when we were down. And I believe that this is why the tribes, when, they came over here, we weren't at our highest state. We were living in, essentially wooden structures. We weren't exactly using the tech that was here. Now, I do believe that there were civilizations outside of the Mayan, the Aztec, and the Inca that were the last remnants of the societies that we had here. Because it's mentioned in the book. Actually, let me see. Damn it! Damn. Hold up. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna find the book for y'all guys. Okay, this book is not in great shape at all, but this is the book. It is called Great Americana: The Relation of David Ingram. Check this book out. It talks about how David Ingram, he walked literally, I think, over 1,000 miles from the Gulf of Mexico, right? He walked from the Gulf of Mexico to Canada. I've shared this before. He went to, I think, like Newfoundland from the Gulf of Mexico after his ship was essentially damaged. They were shot down by the Spanish in a battle over in the Gulf. And I believe they were like in maybe the Texas or Louisiana area in the Gulf, or maybe even parts of Mexico. Well, at that time, a lot of that was Mexico, because this was during the 1500s. And him and a handful of men traveled from the Gulf all the way up to Canada. And they went through they had like an amazing journey, honestly, in their travels. And in their travels, they came over several civilizations that had cities made of stone, cities that stretched for miles. Some of the cities were right next to each other, just like how today, like, for example, in Ohio, we have Cincinnati and Dayton. Literally, Cincinnati and Dayton are just like probably about 30, 40 minutes away from each other. They're not that far from each other, So that's essentially how it was. They had cities right next to cities back then, and they had stone buildings made out of bricks. They even had, structures that had crystals, right? Like glass windows, glass structures. Think about like your greenhouses, like your botanical parks and stuff like that. They had buildings like that. They had 2-story buildings, 3-story buildings that had banquet halls on top of it. This is what he was describing in this book, in his journeys, in his journal, right? So this is what happened, and this is actual documented history. They don't like to share it. One of the cities that he came across was called Norumbegum, right? He said it was a very grand city. So we still had cities when the Europeans who came over, when they came over here, we still had cities that were still the last remnants of Atlantis. But Atlantis was all of America. We had high civilization, and I believe that the technology that we have today is comparable or not as good as what they had back then. It may not have looked exactly the same, but I believe that they had the exact same technology we have today or greater. In my opinion, I think greater, because there's evidence showing that they had flying vehicles that didn't require gasoline, oil and all this stuff, that they actually had flying machine, if you will, that flew simply off of sound, that moves simply off of sound. Like, that's crazy, right? They didn't have to consume or burn any type of energy. So yeah, very, very interesting. Yeah, so that was America, but also also that was Atlantis, aka America. There's many books that say America is Atlantis. I'm talking about old books from the 1800s. But there was also the land of Lemuria, right? And that was the twin sister to Atlantis. Atlantis, once when the Atlanteans started to explore, and mind you, the Atlanteans are all of the descendants of Noah, right? I will go ahead and say that Noah was probably the first Atlantean after the floods happened and after America rised out of the primordial waters, because America is the true old world in many different sense of the meaning, right? Meaning first civilizations were here, and also it was the first one to come up out of the flood waters. Mind you, Noah, and when you read scripture, it doesn't really tell you that Noah traveled in that boat. That essentially the boat was just nothing more than a basket that carried life. Like, right, the flood waters came, it raised up, and it sat there, and then when the waters went down, he went and sat on the mountain. So I would imagine he did some traveling, not by his own volition, but probably the waters moved him around a little bit. But I would imagine he probably didn't go too far, right? And the reason why I say that is because the wood that Noah used to make his ark was gopher wood. The only place where gopher wood is found is here in the Americas, nowhere else. I think it's like a part of the acacia family, the acacia tree. Only found here in America, found in Florida. Go and check out the channel, Old World Florida. He mentions that, he covers that pretty thoroughly, right? So Noah's Ark was made here in the Americas. That wood is not found over in the Middle East. Not at all. No chance at all that was found. It can be found over there in the Middle East. The gopher wood, right? So when the waters came down, he settled these lands over here. That is what a lot of evidence is showing now, that he settled the lands over here. It's the first ones to come out of the water. And I do want to show you guys a book real quick. Let me pull this up. What is this? So yeah, right here, as you can see, give me a second right here. Read this. So it says America, and this book is by Luis Agassiz. This book was written in the 1800s and this guy was a geologist slash what is the study? The study of humanity. I can't remember. But anyways, he was a geologist. He was studying tectonic plates, right? So it says right here, America, the old world. So this is not a new concept. This concept has been around, I want to say, since forever, because they knew what it was back then. The society we live in today is full of lies, while back then they were very honest. And they were, a lot of these so-called white people, they were trying to rediscover who the world is, because they were a relatively new race. They didn't know where the hell they came from. And this is why I believe that during the 1800s and 1900s, you have places like London, that were going around and essentially exploring, because they are already colonized a lot at this point, but they were colonizing to not only spread their white genes, but that they were also trying to figure out the world around them, because they were new. They were trying to figure out where they came from and then explain where everyone else came from, and then marginalize them and put them in different little groups and all this shit, right? But anyways, during this time, this book was written, and it was called what is this book called? It's called Geological Sketches, right, by Louise Agassiz, right? So right here in the first chapter, it says America, the Old World, first born among the continents, though so much later in culture and civilization. So right there, it says first born among continents, right? So right there, he's just come out the gate telling you that America is not anything new, right? So first born among the continents, though so much later in culture and civilization than some of the recent birth, cap. America, so far as her physical history is concerned, has been falsely wait, is that dominated? Yeah, dominated. Is that dominated? I cannot see because the text is so small. But anyways, we're gonna say dominated the new world. I don't think that's dominated. I can't see because the word is so small, but we're just going to say designated, right? Because I think that's what it's trying to be said. Designated the new world. Okay. Hers was the first dry land lifted out of the waters. Hers the first shore washed by the ocean that was enveloped all the earth beside, right? So right there, he's telling you that America was the first to come out of the waters, right? First to come out of the water. So that's pretty much all I wanted to share on this. I believe it goes a little bit more and talking about America being the old world, first old world, but y'all get the point. America is the first lands. It's the original old world, right? So anyways, let me put this down real quick and bring this one back up. So yeah, America is a true old world in many different senses, even when it comes to civilization. Sorry about that. I kind of got a little cold, but yeah, he said that it was falsely given a name, the New World, when it's not. It's the true old world, right? And like I was saying with Lemuria, it's the twin sister of Atlantis. When the Atlanteans started to go out there and conquer the different lands around them, I originally thought that they went from where we are in America's eastward, but in actuality, we went from America westward. So Atlantis is all of North and South America. I'm talking about from Canada all the way down to Tierra del Fuego down there in Argentina, right? That and all the islands of the Caribbean, all the islands on the east coast of the Americas and on the west coast of the Americas, that is all Atlantis. So there were many different civilizations that sprang up out of the Americas, some which we know very much of, and some that we've never even heard of before, right? Some of them not even documented in our history at all, that are absent of our history books, that existed. Great civilizations, might I add, right? They no longer exist. But these civilizations, they left through the western part of the Americas and they went and settled the Pacific. They went and settled these different islands that we have today. And some of the remnants of those people are still here today. I mentioned this a while back that there's this woman of Australian descent, Caucasian woman, just like him, right? She's literally just like him. She's Caucasian, but her grandmother is an Australian Aborigine, right? And this woman was in my Facebook group, which I need to get back into because my Facebook account got hacked. I had to make a new account and I have to get back to my Facebook group. I have to get the other admin to add me back as an admin. But there was this Aborigine woman or white woman who has an Aborigine grandmother. She showed me the picture of her grandmother, of her and her grandmother together. Her grandmother is my complexion, right? Well, a little bit lighter than my complexion because, a lot of them over there today are mixed, right? Even the dark skinned ones are mixed, which is why their hair is like straightish, right? and some of them have really light color eyes and stuff like that. But she showed me a picture of her grandmother, and she's like, "This is my grandmother." And she's like, I know that you guys are the true indigenous of the Americas." I'm like, "Oh, that's cool. How do you know that?" And she's like, "Well, my grandmother, her people have always told us that the Aboriginal people of Australia originally came from the Americas." I made a video on this probably about like 2 years ago, and even showed a article showing that the people of Australia came from South America, right? That they originated from South America and they sailed westward on boats, right? That's how it was. Us Atlanteans, we've always been explorers. We weren't simple, unmotivated, non-innovative people. We've always traveled. We always created, right? So that's what she said about her grandmother's people, that they originally came from the Americas. And it's the same thing with the people from the Polynesian islands, your Micronesians, right? Those are family. That's family, essentially, right? This is why the people of Papua New Guinea and all those places, they look like us, right? I mentioned that many times before. They look like us. They try to say like, "Oh no, they're closely related to Asians." Yeah, I know that they're related to Asians also, and I'll explain why in a little bit. But yeah, there was once a huge landmass out there called Lemuria, right? And it was twin sister to Atlantis. And I believe that when Lemuria went under the waters, because if you look in the Pacific, you can see those lines up under there. I believe when Lemuria went underwater, the East, if you will, talking about Europe, Asia, Africa, they got cut off from the tech, right? They lost a lot of the civilization. And I hear my son running around, so we may hear him soon. But we lost that high. They lost that high civilization and went into the Dark Ages, right? After Lemuria went down, and the East, since they were the closest to Lemuria, they kind of held on to it a little bit more. Like your Japanese, your Chinese, all of them, they kind of hung on to the ancient cultures of Lemuria, right? And they kind of held on to that knowledge, which I think Chinese medicine is nothing more than the knowledge that was passed on from Lemuria, right? That's why they're in Chinese is so much more into holistic treatment of diseases and all that stuff, right? And health, just period, because they still had some of that ancient, knowledge. Same thing with India, right? They still had some of that. And Lemuria was a giant landmass that is in the Pacific. You see that big old void in the Pacific where there's barely any land. There's no landmass in the Pacific at all, like giant landmass. Like where Hawaii is and, that big old space out there. That's because, and New Zealand, all that stuff. That's because that's where a big landmass Lemuria used to be. But after it sank and went underwater, a lot of that tech was lost, right? And then Europe and most of Asia fell into dark ages, right? And in order to get back to that tech, they had to make their way back to Atlantis. The shortest way back over to Atlantis, at least for the Europeans, was taking boats across the ocean, right? It was probably the safest way to, I don't know, right? But for Asia, it was the land bridge that it was and still is here, because there's people saying that they're still crossing that land bridge even to this day, like illegals coming over here through the land bridge, even to this day, from Russia to Alaska. Okay. So, yeah, that's the world that we live in, right? I mean, it's crazy, man. So much stuff is being covered up and being hidden. But yeah, Lemuria, right? That was a twin sister to Atlantis. So anyways, without further ado, let's get into this video, because I know you guys are like, damn, it's like almost 40 minutes and this guy hasn't even showed the video yet. Well, we about to watch it right now.
People from the Americas settled China first. Many claim the Chinese have one of the oldest calendars on Earth. But when the Chu took over after the Shang, much of the history and the calendars were distorted. The Chu created a history that implied why they should rule, and there were many alterations over the centuries of the calendars. Many claim there was Babylonian contact that influenced China, especially technologically. Look, this is true, but this is the original Babylon.
Shout out to the UB. Shout out to him, man.
An early example of Chinese pre-Columbian interaction, the legend of Fusang claims Buddhists came to America in 441.
I mentioned that book a few times. I even showed it years ago. Fusang, check that book out.
Many maps in the 1700s show Fusang in the Americas. There were apparently settlements in several locations. Many claim Fusang was Mexico or stretched to Mexico. Tenochtitlan, modern-day Mexico City, had this grid structure on water, just like Quinsay or Quinsay. Quinsay or Quinsay was this floating city here, an amazing grid on the water there. Marco Polo said Quinsay was the finest city on Earth, the most advanced technologically. Let's compare.
See, so this was over in Asia. That King Sang place was over in Asia, while it was kind of like a mirror of Tenochtitlan, right? Which shows the connection of Atlantis and Lemuria. Those, I think, like I said, I believe China was the last. China had was pretty much like the last remnants of the Lemurians, while your Aztec, Mayans, Inca, well, not so much Inca, but your Aztecs, your Mayans, and even maybe other civilizations like Norwegum were your last remnants of the Atlanteans, which is why they married each other, because literally the Lemurians were nothing more than Atlanteans that kind of went off and started to do their own thing, carrying over the technology and the knowledge that they had in Atlantis, right? But still, Lemuria and Atlantis had connections with each other until Lemuria went down, right? So this is why the East mirrors the West. Talking about the East as in India, and China mirrors what we have over here in the Americas. Look at the temples that we have here in the Americas, and then look at the temples that they have over there in India and parts of Southeast Asia. Almost identical. Even the murals are almost identical, because literally they come from us. The Mayans went out and they went out here and spread civilization and culture and settled a lot of these lands, and they left it over there, right? This is why there's pyramids everywhere around the world. But majority of them are here in the Americas, but there are thousands of them outside of America too. America is the old world, the true old world.
Compare Christopher Columbus's boat to Chinese contemporary boats of the time. China had pyramids stretching as far as the eye can see, as you can see here. Look. Mexico City had this flowing mercury beneath it that was part of powering its grid. Just like in China. Like this. Look. The world was a highly civilized free energy grid. Look at this. This is China. Skyscrapers in the back. There are also Mayan depictions of elephants, which are supposedly only from Asia. The biggest mound is Monk's Mound. We obviously have this dragon connection in America, China, and also Europe. Buddha's temple in the Grand Canyon, the China Wall of the Northwest, the East Bay Wall of California, Chinese inscriptions in the Americas, like this. Antonio Galvao said the Chinese dominated the West Coast. Look at this depiction here. We've got Chinese pagodas in writing over here in the background. This is Libertas, or America, in a Mongolic union. These are the invaders that took over both America and China. They say this was San Francisco in 1870, but this is San Francisco in 1878, completely built out. And these are clearly older buildings. An abandoned city like Loop Loop, Washington, completely built out yet abandoned. The resets and reset wars pushed people off the grid. Asia was being reset in the 11 and 1200s by the Khan. Look. You see the Buddhists came in 441, which is actually 1441. 36 years before the 1476 Great Reset, which was also the fall of Rome, also known as Edom, a Shemitic people. China was a Shemitic area. The Shang was not a dictatorship, it was an autonomous zone, a Shemitic-based autonomous zone. Civilization started in America first, and then people migrated into Asia. Then they migrated into Europe, and then finally into Africa. That is why it is the least developed place. When the Shang fell, the Mongols took over. The Mongols are a mix of Japhethites, Magog, Kenites, Cain, and Canaanites by way of Sin. This is where we get the word Sinim or Zinim or China from. You can see the Cain or Canaan here. This chimeric confederacy took over the grid. They ran these people out into Africa.
Sorry, I had to pause real quick. Even when I was young, I thought the Khoisan people looked like Chinese folks. And there's no wonder why, because they are literally the same. This is why there was a Chinese scientist not too long ago saying that they actually come from Africans. They're the same people, literally the same people. It's just that the Chinese were mutated through mixing, through what I've learned is called vanity mixing, right? To lighten themselves up, right? And to straighten their hair, change their looks and stuff like that. But these are the ancestors to the Chinese, right? And we're going to watch a video actually next because that video is relatively short, talking about Africa and what it is and why this brother just said it was the last to be colonized or developed. And there's a reason for that. Excuse me. There is a reason for that, but let's see. Let's get to the end of this video.
They ran these people out into Africa. These mummies aren't that old.
Anyways, let me get to the next video. Yeah, I just wanted to show this video real quick because it's not that long. It's only about 3 minutes long, but I wanted to show it real quick because what the brother just said about Africa, right? So here's another theory out there, and there's even some evidence to suggest this too. So let's check this out.
This was the land of the exile.
You know, they taught us that Australia was the land of the exile. Man, what I'm starting to learn is that everything they taught us about Africa is backwards. Africa was not the first land where people came out of or civilization came out of. It's not the land where my people came from, you know, as American Negroes. You know, it's just we're learning that we've been lied to by everything, you know. It tells us that this is the first land where black folks came from. No, it wasn't. It's actually the land where white folks came from. Google the homunculus. Check that out. The first white person, right? The one-eyed cyclops. White people are a mutation. And I'm not saying that to sound racist or anything like that, because I have no issue with white people at all. I just hate evil people, period. But yeah, anyways, let's get to this video.
Okay? They don't have no Tartaria over there. They don't have these architectures, over there. Because this place was known for people that violate the law. When you break the law, they set you over there.
That was the prison.
Those are the people that breaks the law. And that's why in Africa, they have the largest genetic diversity.
And he ain't lying. Go look at it. Even science back it up, that they have the largest diversity over there when it comes to genetics. Why is that? Why is that? They'll tell you, oh, well, because humanity sprang out here. Well, you would think if humanity sprang out here, they would have the least genetic diversity. That everywhere else after people started to mutate through science or evolve or whatever the hell you want to call it, there'd be more genetic diversity in these other places because this is where they started to. No. In Africa, they should have the least amount. They should have the original. But where did they find the original at? In the Americas, right? But the reason why there's so much diversity there is because this was the dumping grounds where they were sending their prisoners, their undesirables.
Because this were
and also because it was the last place to be colonized, right? This is why you got so much genetic diversity there, because this was the last place where everybody started to come and converge, right? Right there in Africa.
A dumping ground for genetic splice. There's people in Africa with elephant foot. There's people in Africa, they have the shortest people in the world, and they have the tallest people in the world. That's why you find this was a dumping ground. That's why Africa, they speak about thousands upon thousands of languages, because these people are not from there. This was a dumping ground. They dumping people from different regions there, and they went out there with their own language. So that's why so many languages over there, because this were the land of the exile.
Tell them, Voodoo Chief.
I'm not making this shit up.
Stop playing around.
It's true.
Game over.
African come to Haiti in the 1800s. They were never there before 1800s. They were always there. I mean, it was never African. These were black Europeans. Let me say this again. The people they want to label as African back then was not African. These were black Europeans. These they call them the Huguenots. If you're in Haiti right now, there's a region in Haiti, an area called Huguenots. It's in Pétionville. Okay, just like in Pétionville, there's an area called Pan Americans.
And that's one thing that I've been learning too. Shout out to the brother Cremio, is that for the past, I want to say several years, he's been teaching that, you know, the Europeans who came over here and colonized, they were originally melanated folks, but then over time they started to, and I learned why they're no longer black anymore. The politicians. Now, I do truly believe that there is a ruling class that rules the entire world, of a handful of families, and that they still look like us, but they're hidden. They're the hidden hand, the true hidden hand, not the Rockefellers and all of them. I believe that the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and all of them they used to be black at one point in time, but they bred out through vanity breeding. And that's what happened to you know, a lot of these so-called powerful families, they bred out. Now, some of them are just straight up imposters, like the royal family over in Europe. A lot of them are just imposters. They weren't bred out of their blackness, you know. But what I've learned is that the Europeans that were once here, the ruling class, they bred themselves out. This is where you get the Creole and the mulatto classes here in the Americas. You know, you get the blue vein society because they were essentially the whole blanqueamiento, or the whitening, what they call down there in Latin America. That same thing was happening here in the Americas, but it wasn't in such a large scale as what happened down there in Latin America. It happened on large levels in Latin America to where they were whitening out like crazy at rapid speeds. While here in the continental United States, it was just only something that was being done by certain Black European families, to where now today their descendants are completely whited out. So yeah, I mean, it's crazy, but you know, going back to what he was saying is that a lot of your Caribbean cats, not all of them are indigenous to those lands. Quite a bit of them are actually descendants of the Black Europeans, right? And this goes for a lot of your Caribbean cats, you know, especially over in Hispaniola. So your Dominicans, your Haitians, a lot of them, I'm not going to say all of them, but a lot of them are not the same as us Black Americans. Because what happened to the people in those lands, a lot of them were shipped out of those lands. A lot of the indigenous folks were shipped out of those lands to different parts of the Caribbean and even to what we call the continental United States today. And the people who later settled those lands were the Black Europeans. Hell, even some of them that fought in that Revolutionary War against France were other Black Europeans fighting against France, which was ruled by a Black man at the time, right? So, like I said, man, I've been learning some new things, man, and it's kind of scary, you know.
Because a lot of Black Americans, when they was going to Haiti, they was moving to that area because it was Pétion that did that at that time, and that region for them called Pan America. So that's where they used to go and live. So the Huguenots, this is the name they gave the Black elite Europeans. They called them Huguenots. And that region is still right there in Haiti till today. So these were the Black people that's from Europe that was out there. This is why most Haitians have what you call French last name. It's not because of plantation. Because again, how many plantation is going to take you in order for them to get that many names? It's impossible to have that many plantation with that many names. But what people don't understand, French, those name is indigenous name. They are not French name. Let me say this again. Most Haitian with these French name is not a French name. They are French. They use the French term to identify an indigenous name. They were using French term to identify indigenous name.
It's the same thing in with our names, you know, like the names like Jones, you know, Cook, Forrest, all that stuff. These were names that were originally American Indian names that English language later adopted. They did the same thing with many different other cultures around the world. But yeah, like the brother was saying, is that the Black Europeans who came over here, they became the ruling class. They were the ruling class. They were the original colonizers. And then a lot of them started to wipe themselves out. And the ones who did wipe themselves out, they still have power even to this day. So here in the United States, when we wonder, like, why are these people who look just like us, these Black folks who look just like us, not standing up for us, not giving us reparations? They're always ruling on the side of white folks or non-Black folks. Why are they doing this? It's because they're not us. The Black folks who are in these fraternities, sororities, these Freemasonic societies, you know, Boule and all them, all they are descendants of the Black Europeans, and a lot of them know who they are. They keep it within their family, which is why you have some of those Black bougie families who don't deal with Negroes at all. And if they do, they only deal with Negroes who are in their circle. So a lot of these Black politicians who go out here and aren't making any changes for us, a lot of these Black people who get power in America, a lot of them aren't us. They are descendants of the Black ruling elite who used to be here. They are literally children of the colonizers, the one who colonized our ancestors. It's crazy. And I'm not even going to say that all of us Black Americans are fully indigenous. I'm talking about like genetically speaking. You know, there's a majority of us are majority indigenous, but I think all of us have some of the colonizer in us. You know, the Caucasian colonizer, or let me say the European colonizer, and even the Asian colonizer too.
So I suppose you just let black men marry white women?
Well, they do so in France, and it has caused no calamities.
You can marry outside your race in France?
No, the south of France was ruled by black men at one time, as was Spain and Italy.
Black men ruled Europe?
For
All of Europe.
Part of that empire still exists today. It's called Andalusia.
Yep, all of Europe. It wasn't just those countries they listed. All the entire world was melanated at one point in time. Check out Benjamin Franklin's quote where he talks about I forget what the quote says exactly, but essentially Benjamin Franklin was saying how he wished there were more white people, truly or purely white people in the world, because there's not too many of them. And how you know, he started naming off these different places like Europe, Germany, Asia, America, Africa, how they were all melanated people. So yeah, y'all can check out that quote. Y'all can find it online easily where he talks about it. So anyways, let's get to the next video and then we'll be done. Let me try to find this video real quick. Where is this at? I get upstairs to the fam. They up. So okay, here it is, right here.
More than 500 years ago, Christopher
Oops, let me fix that for you guys.
More than 500 years ago, Christopher Columbus, the legendary explorer, set out on a voyage funded by European royalty to find a western route to India. He didn't make it to India, but he ended up discovering the Americas in 1492, the first person in the world to make it to these shores.
Cap.
Or was he? You see, there are several theories and pieces of evidence like this ancient Chinese map, these Chinese anchors off the coast of California, or these ancient Chinese carvings in New Mexico that point to the Chinese having come to America before Columbus.
Now, I truly, like I said, I truly believe that civilization started here and all of humanity sprung out of the Americas, but I believe that later on they came back. So you had your Asian groups that came back and invaded the Americas before your European groups came back and invaded America. Because remember, when Lemuria went down, they lost a lot of that tech. So they came back over here trying to get that tech back. And when they came over here, they did a bunch of damage. Right? And of course, we know that, you know, the Europeans, their descendants are still here today, whether they're whited out or not. And the Asians who came over here, their descendants are still here today, right? And some of them have been whited out, but they identify themselves today as your Native Americans and also your mestizo Hispanic class, right? Those are the descendants of the Asians who came back over here, who invaded through the Mongolians, right? Damn, there was a book. Cremio actually has the book. He really doesn't like the book or like that because, you know, this is where me and Cremio differ. He does not accept the fact that that the so-called Native Americans of today, he knows that okay, I don't want to put words in that man's mouth, but essentially where me and him differ is that I don't believe that the Asiatic looking Native Americans are true American Indians, because Cremio, he says like, oh yeah, we always had different shades, so on and so forth. Yeah, we had light-skinned folks here in the Americas, but they came through, they were either albinos, right? Or they were people who had like some type of leprosy. Well, they say leprosy, but some type of skin condition like vitiligo, right? So we did have pale skinned folks here. And yes, we do create lighter skinned babies. Like we can create lighter skinned babies, which goes against the theory that white people were like Adam and Eve were white. Like that doesn't make sense because you can first of all, we know that white skin scientifically is a recessive gene, right? So black folks can create a recessive gene. We can do that. But there wasn't whole tribes and civilizations of light-skinned folks here in the Americas. Yeah, we can create, like naturally, often create babies that are slightly lighter than ourselves, but nothing drastically lighter, right? But like I was saying about the theory of Adam and Eve, there's no way in hell they could be white because white cannot produce black. We have never seen a case of two white families creating babies our complexion, but there are cases of families with this complexion creating babies that are this complexion, right? We've seen that. We've seen that. So there's no way in hell Adam and Eve could be black. Like Noah had two white sons and just one black son. Like, make that make sense. How is Noah, a white man, gonna create a dark-skinned baby? That doesn't happen anywhere at all. So anyways, I know people are going to be like, well, what about the Black Panther? No, actually, leopards and panthers, jaguars are all their fur is literally black up under that, and then the spots are actually the yellow stuff, right? It's actually the opposite way around from what it looks. Crazy, right? Go and Google it. But anyways, yeah, there were, Creamill, he believes that there were a bunch of light skin just because they said in older books that there were white Indians, but we don't understand that white at that time just meant a class of people. The reason why I think it differs from what Benjamin Franklin was saying, because Benjamin Franklin, he expressed purely white, instead of it just being white, which denoted a class back in those days, right? So I do believe that there were light-skinned people here in the Americas, but I don't believe that there was like whole civilizations and tribes at that time, because even the Asiatic folks at that time were dark skinned, documented as dark skinned. They were dark skinned up until like 100 to 150 years ago. They were dark skinned. So yeah, anyways, let's get back to it. But yeah, the point of this video is to show that these Asiatic folks, they came over here. The so-called Native Americans, they are invaders. Check out Taylor Durden's videos because he goes in a lot on that.
They just for some reason decided they didn't like it here and didn't stick around. In this video, I want to give you 4 such theories, and remember, they are just theories. You can make up your own mind what you believe. And this video is brought to you by Puritung, but more on that later. Number 1, Chinese explorer Zheng He.
Zheng He.
So Zheng He was a Chinese Muslim explorer who went on 7 voyages to the west. He is regarded as one of the most glorious figures in Chinese history by people today, primarily for the fact that he makes China look really good. He's basically China's Columbus. They even named a ship after him in Star Trek.
Acting Captain Will Riker in command of the USS Zheng He.
They kind of butchered the pronunciation. But anyway, he was a court eunuch under Emperor Yongle in the Ming Dynasty.
And all those pictures of the Chinese, hell, even with the East Indians, that's all whitewashed. They were all melanated. They were all this complexion.
He was tasked with sailing to the west to show off the Ming Dynasty's power and collect tributes to the emperor from so-called tribute states. So when you see old paintings, for example, of giraffe in China, that came as a tribute from the Sultan of Bengal on Zheng He's voyage. These expeditions were massive. Zheng He had over 60 ships, up to 240 feet in length, with 6 decks each, and a total crew across the whole fleet of 28,000 men. Now, typically people think Zheng He's voyages went something like this. He basically followed the coast of Asia west, past India, around the Arabian Peninsula to the east coast of Africa, and then came back. He went 7 times, going only as far as India the first few times, and then making 3 trips all the way to Africa. Well, that's all well and good, except for the fact that there is another map that appears to show Zheng He actually circumnavigated the world and mapped the entirety of North and South America with some level of accuracy. I mean, he had California floating in the sea off the west coast, but maybe we're better off without them. Zheng He managed to predict Calexit before it even happened. Now, this map is supposedly an 18th century copy of a 1418 map that would, if real, show that Zheng He discovered America 70 years before Columbus. Only problem is the origin of this map is really not that clear. It was supposedly discovered by a Beijing-based lawyer who bought it from a second-hand bookstore for about $500 US. I mean, that doesn't even make sense. Who spends $500 in a second-hand bookstore? But according to the Daily Mail, Mr. Liu had the map authenticated by an appraiser from Christie's Auctions, who said that the document was very old and was not a newly made fake. It then attracted the attention of British historian Gavin Menzies, who did his own research on the map and says that the fact the map shows some of the same names for towns in Peru that were being used in the early 1400s shows its authenticity. Menzies used this argument in his book, Who Discovered America, to claim that Zheng He made it all the way to the Americas on his voyages. Now, personally with this one, I don't think this map proves anything whatsoever. For starters, it's supposedly an 18th century copy anyway. Maybe they updated it with new knowledge, and if Zheng He did reach America, it would be a glorious achievement in China's semi-recent history. Wouldn't there be some other record of it in Chinese historical writings? So for me, this is the least likely of the four theories that we're going to look at. All right, let's move on to the next one. Number 2, Chinese characters carved in New Mexico. Now, before getting into the fascinating ancient Chinese characters found carved on rocks in New Mexico, I want to talk about the sponsor of today's video, Puritang. Of any supplement that you could include, but not Puritang also uses
We do not care.
So if Zheng He didn't discover America coming from the east, maybe Chinese explorers came across the Pacific to the west coast. Is there any evidence of that? Well, there appear to be ancient Chinese characters carved on the rocks in New Mexico. This was discovered and researched by John Ruskamp. This rock near Albuquerque, New Mexico appears to show a very old version of Chinese characters that mixes both Seal and Bronze era scripts, which were common during the Shang dynasty that existed from around 1600 BC to 1046 BC.
This is a date of a man bowing down to the emperor, making the sacrifice of a dog in an official sacrifice. That's what this tripart symbol is. And the chances of putting these all together in the right order is 1 sextillion.
Ruskamp writes that National Park Service personnel confirmed the characters had been there for over 150 years. And that is significant because the understanding of these scripts, especially the Bronze era script, was lost after the Shang dynasty until the discovery of the oracle bones in Anyang, China in 1899. An American over 150 years ago would simply have no knowledge of these characters. Neither would a Chinese immigrant before 1899.
So see, people would be like, oh man, that's completely cap. But see, we Americans want to have had that knowledge at this time of that ancient Chinese writing. So we want to sit here. I mean, we got to get our feelings about these things, you know, like, oh no, the Chinese didn't come over here and settle. No, Native Americans are descendants of the Chinese who came over here. And at the time, they were of the Mongol Empire. That's really what it was. The Chinese Empire and the Mongol Empire are literally the same. The Chinese empires literally came from the first Chinese emperor was a descendant of Genghis Khan. Okay, so I know people don't like to face that fact, and come on, it is what it is, man. It's a reason why these so-called Native Americans of the Asiatic stock look just like Chinese folks.
Which points to the idea that they were carved by a Chinese person during the Shang dynasty when the script was in use. But how did they get to America? Well, there is the theory of a land bridge during the Ice Age when sea levels were lower and people could just walk across from Northeast Asia to what is modern-day Alaska. But the last Ice Age ended 11,500 years ago, so that relates to much earlier settlers. The DNA of Native Americans is believed to be related to Asians, and this is an explanation for their arrival in the US, but that would be many thousands of years before Chinese culture, which has a history of about 5,000 years. So
trust me, all that stuff that they teach about the land bridge and people come over here several thousand, maybe hundred thousands of years ago to settle the Americas is all cap. All that happened in recent times. Yes, they use a land bridge to come over here to invade, but they also use boats too. And they mostly use the boat to get to the further parts of the Americas, so like Central and South America, even the West Coast of California. I can't remember the name of the book to save my life, but it talks about how the Mongolians came over here and they brought elephants. They used elephants to war against our people that were here. They were terrorizing our people, so on and so forth. You know, the whole thousands of years ago land bridge, that's all cap. All cap.
But the other possible explanation is that they came by boat.
The American way, right?
You know about that.
Fresh off the boat.
Just like Zhenghe did following the coastline west, if you follow the coast of Asia east, it takes you past Japan and Russia to the Bering Sea, where the eastern tip of Russia is actually really close to Alaska.
You can actually see Russia from land here in Alaska.
You can then follow the coast down to California.
Evidently, they came by sea. They likely came in just north of Los Angeles on the Santa Clara River. We picked them up at Barstow, California, in a great number of writings here.
From similar carvings in California, Arizona, and New Mexico, it looks like they basically followed Route 66, like a group of excited Asian tourists.
But also too, there was this scimitar sword that was found, I believe, in Tennessee. So they made it pretty far. They made it pretty far. The Asiatic folks did.
Until they reached Albuquerque, New Mexico, and then left their mark to honor the Shang Dynasty king on a rock there. But it doesn't look like they set up a civilization here. There are other similar carvings scattered around which Ruskamp believes are copies made by Native Americans. So perhaps it was just a small expedition.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they kind of mixed in with the folks that were here, the indigenous people that they conquered. But also, I do believe that they were warred against. If you look at, you know, some of the murals of the Mayan, you see them killing these folks. You see them killing these folks, right? And then that book where it talks about how, you know, the Mongolians warred against against the people who were there before the Incan civilization was formed. They were warring. And I think that that's why, you know, a lot of your so-called Asiatic Native American groups didn't have structures. They didn't have cities and civilizations because they were a war-torn people. They were people who were warred against and defeated in a lot of their wars and living in these tents and teepees, which are nothing more than temporary structures, right? You know, they're just like a war camp. If you ever watched anything historical about wars, before people would go and invade cities and they would set up camps, they would put up tents and teepees everywhere. That's how so-called Native Americans of the West were moving, in teepees. And this is why they were always warring against people, right? Invading and doing all this stuff because they were invasive. They're not from here. This is why their tents and teepees and even their culture mirrors what's over in Asia to this day. Go and look at the yurts over in Mongolia. Go and look at the Sami people of Eurasia and how they literally live in teepees identical to what's over here. They literally have identical clothing to the Native Americans over here. Culture, customs, even language, right? So, yeah, you gotta wake up.
Missionary group, and when they got here, after what would have been an epic voyage, they made contact with the Native Americans before heading back. Or even if they stayed, they simply got absorbed into the Native American communities already here. Now, if you think it's unlikely that this voyage happened, take a look at our next piece of evidence. Number 3, Chinese anchors off the coast of California. In 1973, a US Navy survey ship was dredging the seabed off of California on the far side of Catalina Island, you know, the place on that Apple desktop photo, and came up with a donut-shaped stone object. This object was studied by Dr. C.C. Wu of the US Geological Survey, and according to the manganese coating, which was 3 millimeters thick and builds up on objects submerged in seawater at a rate of 1 millimeter every 1,000 years, it put the age of the object at approximately 3,000 years, or put simply, it was lost to the sea at around 1,000 years BC, around the time of the style of script that was found on the rock in Albuquerque. And this area of the seabed is full of such objects. The objects were then studied by Dr. James R. Moriarty of the University of San Diego, and yes, confusingly, the name is very similar to Jim Moriarty, the fictional enemy of Sherlock Holmes. But anyway, Moriarty and his student Larry Pearson analyzed the objects, and they found that they resembled stone rollers used for milling, road building, and anchor components in ancient China. So their research supports the claim that the Chinese sailed to the west coast of North America as far back as the Shang Dynasty and were able to write the inscription on the rock in New Mexico. But wait, there's more. Moriarty's research was cited by another Chinese academic, Feng Zhongpu, to back up what may be the first written account of a Chinese person reaching North America. And guess what? It was 1,000 years before Columbus. Number 4, the Buddhist monk Hui Shen. Now this story comes from the Book of Liang, or Liang Shu, completed in the year 635 AD. It tells of a Buddhist monk called Hui Shen who made a voyage to somewhere around the year 500 AD. He talks of a land called Fusang, and here's what it says about it in the book. Fusang is 20,000 li away from China, located in the east. Its lands have many Fusang trees, and thus it was named as such. 1 li is about 1/3 of a mile, so 20,000 li to the east would have taken Hui Shen to somewhere around Acapulco, Mexico. Now listen to the description of the trees. The leaves of the Fusang tree are like Polonia. When it's young, it's like a bamboo shoot. The people of the country eat it. Its fruit is like a pear, but red. Its bark is used for cloth for clothes, and also for silk, and for wooden houses. They had no walled cities. They had a writing system, and they used the Fusang bark for...
See, this is what I was saying. They said that we had no walled cities, but a lot of the ancient biblical kingdoms had walled cities. This is why I was saying earlier that I believe that they caught us with our pants down. We were at low civilization at this point, which made it easy for them to invade us. Atlantis society was only had remnants of it over here, which made it easy for them to conquer us. Talking about the Asiatic invaders, and then also later on the European invaders, like Hernan Cortez and all them. De Soto.
Paper. Scholars believe that what Hui Shen is describing is the century plant, or agave, which does have a trunk like a bamboo shoot. It has fruits that can be red in color, and its fibers can be used for making rope and cloth. The plant grows throughout Mexico. Hui Shen supposedly left on his voyage in the year 451 AD and returned in 499. In that 48-year time frame, it is possible that he could have traveled that far. Another piece of supporting evidence is that the ocean current in the north of the Pacific, known as the Japanese Current, runs east and would carry a ship from Asia to the coast of California. Then there is another current going the other way that starts from the coast of Central America that could have, in theory, carried Hui Shen's ship back home to tell the story. Alright guys, so that is the story of how the Chinese discovered America. Obviously, these are only theories.
Anyways, a lot of evidence. Too much evidence. But anyways, guys, I'm up out of here. I will talk to y'all later. So peace out, shalom, and may the Most High bless all y'all who do his will. Peace.